DIYers, what's going on? Mike Borders with the Mike Borders channel. Thank you for watching. This is part 6 of our Mercruiser lower unit rebuild. Let's get started. All right, DIYers, back at it again. Part 6 of our lower unit full rebuild, and we're going to pick up right where we left off. Time to install the bearing carrier, and there's our new carrier, reverse gear, and thrust ring. In here is our O-ring, tab washer, and an additional key that we'll use when installing the carrier. Let's get started. Next, I grabbed the 2,4C grease. We will need that. I've got the O-ring. Here's the part number. And I'm going to pull this out. Set that aside. There it is. And I need to put this on the beveled or indent portion of the bearing carrier. And it might go on fairly easy this way, but if you're having trouble, you will have to go from the opposite direction. Notice how I push the thrust ring back? And just keep this rubber O-ring going over the gears. Do your best not to allow the O-ring to get damaged on the gears. As you can see, I got a little part there. I'll inspect, make sure everything looks good, and it does. And again, flush with the beveled portion of the base of the carrier the whole way around. Set that aside. Now it is time to grease. We are greasing the bearing carrier because we are going to slide it down the cavity and in place to match the reverse gear with the pinion gear and clutch dog. And per the service manual, again, we need to grease this carrier. We're going to do both the base of the carrier, the O-ring, and the retainer portion. And really get it on there. This is also going to help allow the carrier to be shifted down the cavity in the lower unit a lot more efficiently. In addition, stay away from the gear. Do not get any grease on the gear. If you get grease on the gear, get that off prior to installing it. And the cool thing about the thrust ring, it basically acts as a guard, which is cool. And really get it on there. Also, this grease is going to help this rubber O-ring properly seat deep in the cavity to create that oil-tight and watertight seal, keeping the oil and gear lube in and the water out. What I will do now is I'm going to carefully shift the bearing carrier and rest it on the reverse gear because we actually have to grease the inner portion of this oil seal. Again, to help the rubber portion of that seal properly seat on the propeller shaft so it can make that proper seal to keep water out. And inside the carrier, we have a brand new bearing as well with a bunch of needles inside it. That has already been greased, so we're not really going to hit that, but if you have replaced yours and it is not lubricated with grease, use that 2,4C, get that needle bearing lubricated and greased up. There it is. I'll get that off there. Next, what I'll do is lubricate this portion of the carrier. From here, I'll clean myself up. And to another close-up of the carrier prior to shifting it into the lower unit. And this little slot right there, very important. That is where that little key goes. And when installing this bearing carrier, that will go in on the top portion. And it must be aligned with this little machine cutout in the thread. And by doing that, you will ensure that the carrier is properly positioned in the lower unit, and you'll be able to install that key in the slot. One last look inside. Everything looks good. Everything is out of the way. And as we shift this down the cavity, it may be necessary to rotate the drive shaft up top to move that pinion gear and clutch dog to help you align the teeth from the reverse gear on the bottom portion of this carrier to help you shift it in all the way past this thread right here. And I'll put my hands basically inside here, do my best not to touch the outer portions where the grease is. I will need to use my left arm to adjust this thrust ring and right onto the shaft. Align the thrust ring, and again, that little key slot must be aligned with the machine cut in the thread up top. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth. It should slide right in. And from here, you may need to pull it back out to align that key again in that slot. And that grease really helps when aligning that key slot with the machine groove. It's very easy to turn this carrier, even being inside that cavity. One last good push, and that is flush. From here, that little teeny tiny key. Do your best not to drop it. See that? Now to a close-up of the carrier inside the lower unit, and that key, as you can see, is perfectly aligned in that groove in the thread and the top slot of the carrier. And part number for that key is right there down below in the comment section, as well as description section is a link to purchase that. Now what we'll do, we've got a package of 2 tab washers, and just match the one up with yours. In our case, it is this one and not the other one. This portion right here, we want to make sure is aligned on the bottom triangle portion of our carrier. As you can see, the triangle is properly aligned with the lower triangle slot of the carrier. And now it is time to open up our spanner nut, and there's the part number, and tighten this carrier in place. Prior to installing the retainer, make sure it is aligned properly on the face facing out toward the prop or you. You will see the word off with an arrow and additional circles. Those are drill points in the event that this gets seized or stuck in place later down the road when it's time to take this off to remove your carrier to service everything. You'll notice the backside doesn't have anything. So again, position this properly, carefully shift it down and align it with the threads and turn it clockwise. And we are actually going to torque this retainer to 210 pounds with a torque wrench. And the torque wrench I have been using in this rebuild process only went up to 150. So I actually had to go borrow one that went up to 210 from a friend. And once it gets hand tight, which it is right now, time to go back to this big tool. Carefully slide it down the propeller shaft and into the slots, lock it in place. We'll grab our socket and the torque wrench and torque it to 210. Torque wrench in hand. And again, 210 pounds. And I might need to reposition this entire lower unit and stand on the ground to give me better leverage. However, I'll do my best to show you as much as I can. And yeah, I'm going to reposition this. All right, DIYers, bear with me. I'm going to apply my leg to one side to alleviate this from shifting, and I'm going to torque this to 210. And all we're waiting for is this torque wrench to click. And it is really tough right now. And as you do this, just carefully rotate the drive shaft to ensure you're not forcing that reverse gear teeth into the pinion gear teeth in an offset manner. That could lead to broken teeth. That's not good. There it goes. You hear that click? Back on top of the workbench, I'll give you a close-up of everything we just installed in the lower unit here shortly. However, what we need to do is test the forward Neutron gears to ensure that they work properly. And as I do this, take a look at the propeller shaft as well as up here the drive shaft. And I'll use my left hand to go down to the shift shaft and I'll rotate it clockwise or toward us. And as I move this propeller shaft, you can see the drive shaft rotate as well. Now I will shift the shift shaft to the neutral position, and as I rotate this propeller shaft, the drive shaft does not rotate. Next, I'll shift the shift shaft counterclockwise or away from us, and you can see as I rotate the propeller shaft to the right or clockwise, the drive shaft up top also rotates. And back to neutral. Perfect. Now to a close-up as promised. And what we need to do now is direct our attention to that tab washer. This is the old one, and I grabbed it to ensure that I am bending the tabs on the tab washer the exact same as the old one. And the 2 tabs on the left-hand side, those are going to be bent inward or away from us. This one right here, that is going to be bent outward or toward us, and the far left one will be bent inward or away from us. And again, I'll show you, there is the lower triangle portion, align that. And you can see this tab we bent out earlier in the project, and that third one bent in, and that's what we'll do now. What I'm using to punch 3 of the 4 in is a nail set. Down below in the comment section as well as description section is a link where to purchase this. There it is. And be patient. Do not hit the shaft with your hammer. No need to rush this. And to another close-up, and DIYers, in the beginning, the tabs were easy to bend in. However, as time went on, as you can see, I scuffed them up pretty good. They were a little harder, but we got them. From here, we'll pull that final tab outward in between these 2 little notches here. in the retainer. Next, I zoomed in, give you a better view. I'm getting a little creative here. I got a little piece of rubber, and I'm going to insert it right there, and I've got needle nose pliers with a bend on them. I'm using the rubber to get a better grip. Now, they do make specific tools to pull these out, but I don't have them. And from here, just apply some friendly pressure and bend that upwards. Back to a close-up, and I've got the tab as far bent out and upward as I possibly could. We still have a few things to do, and it's onto the base assembly for the water pump housing and impeller. There's some part numbers, OEM. Check that out, and that will be installed again right up top. And there's the old one. Let's go and open them. Here it is all unpackaged, and again, left side, there's the base, the O-ring, the impeller, a couple gaskets. There's the water pump housing, a new key, the tube, and a few additional rubber seals, as well as the screw. I'll reposition the camera. Let's get started. At this point, I have removed the blue tie strap that secured the lower unit to the base. I've grabbed the Quicksilver Marine Grease 24C with Teflon, and that is what the PTFE stands for. The service manual calls for this specific grease during this stage of the project. The base of our water pump, we are going to first install the gasket. And by doing that, make sure you line it up properly, as shown here. And you want to put the gasket on before you put the O-ring on, because once you put the O-ring on, it's going to be tough to get that gasket on. What we'll do now is lubricate this O-ring. And yep, you're going to get a little dirty, but that's okay. This grease will help the O-ring shift onto that base a lot more efficiently, and it will assist in creating that watertight or oil-tight seal. I'm going to dry my hands real quick. And basically grabbing one end of the base with my thumb and install this O-ring, as shown here, right in that little gap. What I'll do from here is lubricate the outer edge of the base itself, as well as just a little bit inside where the seal is. Do your best not to get sloppy with it. And again, just a little bit on the inside of that oil seal. Just like that. Next, I reposition the lower unit and stand back onto the ground to give you a better view of this. Grab your base, ensure that your gasket and O-ring are properly placed, and we'll slide it down the drive shaft. Keep the gasket flush with the bottom portion of the base as you slide this down and align it with the threaded studs. And as you shift this down, properly align that bottom portion and give it some friendly pressure to properly seat it inside the cavity, as shown here. And you will know it's properly seated when it is actually below the surface of the lower unit case. Now it's time to install the gaskets. The first gasket we will install is this one right here, DIYers. It is extremely important to install these gaskets in the proper order, or when it comes time to pressure test, you won't actually be able to hold pressure. Slide these down the threaded studs. Do your best not to rip them. And the top portion of the base has these two black tabs. Properly align the gasket holes with those tabs and push it flush with the base. Next, your faceplate, as shown here. Same thing, it's got two holes for those two tabs, as shown here. And the final gasket, this one right here. Same thing, align the tabs with the holes and push the gasket flush with the top portion of the faceplate. Now it's time to install the key. I'm going to turn the drive shaft. You can see the machine cutout for the key, and the back side of the key, what I did was apply just some grease, and this is going to help it stick to the actual shaft, as shown here. I'll zoom in. There it is. And I am going to shift the drive shaft back so that the key is perfectly aligned and facing the rear portion of the lower unit. Back to the workstation, and again, here is the brand new water pump housing. Here is the new impeller and a couple additional parts. Here's my old housing, and I am going to reference when I install that impeller into the housing, the actual impeller blades or fins or vanes, whatever you want to call them, are positioned the proper way. So I'll set that aside. And to do that, we basically have to grab the housing with our left hand, impeller with our right hand, and shift the entire impeller counterclockwise. But I'm going to lubricate the inner portion of this housing first with Teflon. And this portion, again, don't overdo it. You just need a light coat of grease on the inner portion of this housing. And that's going to assist in getting this impeller in. From here, I'll just add some friendly pressure as I do this. And it's not easy. And there it is in. And from here, what I want to do is align that little groove inside the inner housing with that little gap inside. That will line up right there with the number 2. And it is basically in line and flush. I'll give it one last good push down to make sure the entire rubber impeller is properly seated in that housing. And a quick reference to the old one just to ensure they're the same. If you install this incorrectly, you're going to overheat your engine. That is not what you want. I'll set that aside, and what I will do next is lubricate the inner seal that the water tube is going to seat up against. And install the water tube. And that is it. I'm just cleaning some marks off the water tube, set that aside. Next thing I'm going to do is just lubricate the inner seal or top portion of the impeller inside. Again, don't overdo it. Next, time to install the impeller. And as you do this, what we did was properly align the internal impeller so that the groove will line up with the key. And if you do this correctly, it should go on very easily. As shown here. Now it's time to install the hardware. I've got the 1/2 inch nut and washer. And I'm going to hand tighten this only. Next, your 7/16 washer and nut. Again, hand tighten only. Do not cross thread these nuts onto the threaded studs. That would not be good. And now to the front side. Last but not least, your 5/16 screw. Back to the ratchet and socket, and we are going to tighten all of the hardware in sequence. And what I mean by that is we will start here and tighten this 5 to 7 turns. Come to this nut, 5 to 7 turns, 5 to 7 turns, 5 to 7 turns, and by doing that in sequence, it will properly seat this housing to the gasket to create that watertight seal. At this point, I've got all 3 nuts secured and the 5/16 screw, and I've grabbed the gasket here. I lubricated the inside of it, and just shift this all the way down, flush with the top portion of the water pump housing. Next, I grabbed the O-ring and I lubricated that with that 2,4-C grease. And same thing, shift it over the spline portion and it will shift right into the machine groove on the shaft. Back on top of the workstation, I am now going to carefully remove the rubber oil feed gasket. Just have a little pick tool here. And it comes right out. As you see here, a little stubborn in that area. There it is. I am now going to clean the inner portion. Next, I grab the new oil seal And I just dabbed a little bit of SAE 90 gear lube, and I'm going to lubricate the gasket as shown here. And I'm going to properly seat it inside the little groove or cutout and just apply some friendly pressure and clean up the top portion as shown there. To a different camera angle, here is the finished product as you can see, and our specific service manual called for those nuts to be tightened to 70 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds, and that 5/16 screw to 30 inch-pounds. So reference your owner's manual to ensure you're not over-tightening the water pump housing in place. What we'll do now is shift down and replace the water pickup inserts. You got one on each side. We'll need a Phillips screwdriver. Again, just a standard Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to unscrew counterclockwise the screw. And as you can see, they become loose. I'm holding the rear insert and nut in place. And let me give you a view of that. To the opposite side, there's the nut, and I am continuing to unscrew that long screw that goes through the case, and I'm just applying some pressure to the nut because once the screw is loose, that entire nut will basically fall out just like that. From here, I'll come to the opposite side with the screwdriver and just apply some pressure to the base of the screw to pull the screw out from the other side. And once I pull that out, I can carefully pull the inserts right out. Check that out. It's got a little hook on the top that feeds up and loops into the back side of the case. To the opposite side, what I'll do is grab the screw, and chances are the insert will come out with it, as you see here. And there it is. Let's go get the new parts. In front of us now are the new parts, starting with the nut. There's the part number. And then I've got two inserts. I'll do my best to post links down below in the comment section as well as description section. And here is the part number for that long screw. Let's go and open everything. New parts are on package. I want to show you the difference between the inserts. One has basically a nut mold to it, as you see here. That's going to go on the left side, obviously. And this one does not have that nut mold. It's perfectly round. And that is for the screw. That'll go on this side. And here are the old parts put back together. Basically trash. All I'm doing now is vacuuming real quick. Next, grab your new part. Again, the perfect circle mold. It's got this top hook. Shift that in place and push in from here. Put the screw through to the opposite side, and this is the nut mold. And again, that upper hook. And from here, I'll basically push them in and align that screw and push it all the way through the insert. There we go. As you can see here, you can kind of see the screw coming through. Grab your brand new nut and align it properly in the nut mold as you see there. And I'm going to apply pressure with my thumb and go to the opposite side and apply pressure with the screwdriver. And without cross-threading the screw into the nut, go ahead and tighten the two together. And on the inner thread of the nut is some thread locker, which is nice. Back to the opposite side, and I'm just tightening the screw. Don't over-tighten it. You want it snug, but do not over-tighten it. To a closer look, as you can see. To the opposite side, again, the base of the screw came right through and is secured in the thread locker of that nut. And DL wires. That completes part 6. From here, we got to do a pressure test. Scrolling above right now is the link to that video. Definitely check it out. From here, we hope you're still with us. Again, thanks for watching. Do us a favor, below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.